In this lesson, we're going to discuss top-down processing and bottom-up processing, how both of them help us to direct attention, and how designers can leverage both of those techniques in order to make their data visualizations more valuable and help the sense-making activities of the person that's watching them. In thinking about top-down and bottom-up processing, we want to think about what are all the different settings that our visualizations could be viewed in or be used in. So for example, how would top-down and bottom-up processing be used, or how would we direct attention, how would we want to direct attention up here? How would we help the pilots understand that maybe at a certain part of the flight, they should be directing attention somewhere over here, or because of what they're seeing in the display over here, they should be directing attention over here. Or maybe there's actually data over here or information over here that can be gleaned to help them better understand where they are in the flight and how they should respond. And how is that type of design different, if at all, if instead of designing for that cockpit, we're actually designing for visualizations that are going to sit somewhere in one of these reports, or maybe this report, or maybe even this report, where it's not the same type of setting, it's not the same type of actor, it's not the same type of time tempo, but maybe it's the same criticality, or maybe it's different criticality. So with all that in mind, we're going to talk about bottom-up approaches first, and we think of those as context-free approaches. And what I mean by context-free is that this is the processing that happens that is primarily directed by the stimuli coming in towards us. So it's outward in. So these are the photons of light coming into our eyes. These are the sound waves that we're apprehending with our ears. This is all of those things coming at us. One of the best examples of a good bottom-up technique is the advent of the spinning sirens. They're also the spinning flames, the dancing flames. But the spinning sirens are a good one. From the kind of the beginning of the World Wide Web in the mid-90s. So the conventional wisdom went, if you didn't have good enough content to draw people's eyes, and you could draw their eyes by look at this dancing baby or look at this spinning siren, and it had absolutely nothing to do with your content, but it draws attention. I mean, it's moving, it's change in a background against a background in that way. One of the best low-tech ways to figure out what the bottom-up processing contributor to directing attention is do what I like to call the squint test. And basically you do exactly that. You squint at the screen and you see what still is able to be seen there. So this is a good example of that. If you could take a second, I'll wait, and squint at this and tell me what you see. Okay, so when I squint at this, there's a couple different things that I see. The very first thing that I see is this big red thing in the middle. That big thing here, I see that. I see some other things. I see some things down here. I see there are some big white words up here. And again, what squinting does, it helps you to see what are kind of the major salient features of the pixels themselves. Because what it does is it kind of gets away from us reading things and being able to see the details, and that engages our top-down processing. A more high-tech version of the squint test can be performed with what's called eye tracking software, where usually the participant will put on glasses, and their gaze across the screen will be recorded, and where they gaze the most will be shown in a hot red, and then where they gaze the least will be in these greens, and so it kind of just like a heat map, and then where there's no gaze at all, it'll be transparent. So what we see from here is that our gaze, our squint test predictor is actually pretty good. And they're looking straight to here. They also look up here in the upper left-hand corner and then up above, which is a pretty common place for people to start looking. But immediately they go here and pretty much stay here, and they seem to like this area of this picture as well. Where they don't seem to be looking very much, but they're looking a little bit, is right here, and that's supposed to be the most important part of the picture, is how to get a hold of this company. So as you can see, this no fees thing seems to be a big bright shiny object, but it's taking a lot of attention away from where they're actually supposed to be attending to. So with a quick redesign with this, now they've again do the squint test up here, and you can see that this is the primary thing you're looking at. Maybe a little bit of this truck, and you can see that bears out in the squint test as well. So the intent of the designers now matches what's actually being seen and attended to by the people viewing it. So that covers, or at least as an introduction into how we can leverage bottom-up processing. How about top-down processing? And again, we're talking about now it's context-sensitive, where we will design things in a way that people will use their previous experiences, their previous conceptions of the world to start making sense and start paying attention to specific objects in specific ways. And whereas bottom-up processing is a little bit more straightforward because it is context-free, exactly how people will leverage your marks in the media from a top-down perspective, it depends. You kind of have to get in with them and understand where they're coming from. It's something that Sidney Dekker calls getting in the tunnel with them. And what we find is that whereas sometimes maybe it's easy enough to get in the tunnel and try to understand those conceptualizations, those thought patterns of the folks that we're designing for, maybe sometimes that's easy. Most of the time it's actually quite difficult, and this is an example I like to give, where if we try to design and try to understand what was going on September 10th, 2001, even though it wasn't that long ago, it's very difficult for us to remember some of the things that were really important in how we were conceptualizing from a national defense standpoint, as well as just a kind of an everyday American standpoint, what we were thinking was important and why. And the examples that I give here are, this is the one of the last things Bill Clinton was talking about is what was really important was the deficit, and that's what his plan was doing. Economic domestic policies were really important to the country right then. This is the series of surpluses that we had in the budgets for the Clinton years, and then we started seeing deficits as coinciding with the Bush tax cuts. So that was something that was on people's mind, and that was a political issue that had a lot of momentum there, much more than any of the foreign matters. And we just gone through a huge tumultuous election, down here, and then as polls were taken of what is the largest threat to the United States, the largest one was China. Then we went down, and the things that were going on in Iraq, things that were going on in Russia at that point. Those big nation states were a big issue, and Al Qaeda was kind of way down here and barely a blip on the radar, on the collective radar before September 11th. So what we'll be doing for the rest of this course is coordinating these two types of processing, and we'll do that in the service of really what matters. We're going to try to help with our designs to help people understand what should they pay attention to now, where should they pay attention on the screen, what is important, and so we're actually going to go through tools and techniques for the rest of the course to define those kinds of things.